At our wedding, my mother-in-law stood up and screamed, "No son of mine will marry a woman who won't obey our traditions." My husband sighed and said, "Just do it to keep the peace." I smiled, pulled out my phone, and said, "Actually, let's ask your grandmother." When she saw the live video call, her eyes went wide with fear. I, 34 female, married my husband Luis, 35 male, after dating for almost 6 years. We live in Northern California, but both come from Mexican families. That said, our upbringings were very different. My family is more modern, independent, and relaxed. His is traditional, deeply traditional, almost like something from a different century. When we got engaged, I expected some disagreements here and there. But I wasn't prepared for the storm that came from one person in particular, his mother. For the sake of privacy, I'll call her Dona Lilia. But in her house, she insists everyone calls her La Dona. No joke. She refers to herself that way in third person. She signs emails as La Dona. It's not just a nickname, it's a whole persona. From the second we announced the engagement, she wanted control. Here are just a few of the things La Dona insisted on. The wedding must be held in Guanajuato, Mexico, where she was born, even though neither of us live there. I had to wear her wedding dress from the 1980s, yellowed lace, shoulder pads, and all. The wedding party should follow a gender-segregated format, including walking separately down the aisle. No modern music, no dancing after 7 p.m., and definitely no white wine, which she said was for unclean women. I pushed back. Gently, at first. I tried to compromise. I said we could get married in Guanajuato, even though I wanted to stay local. I let her pick the priest. I agreed to include some traditional elements. But I said no to the dress. And I said no to canceling dancing, drinking, and music that reflected our personalities. Luis was stuck in the middle. He kept saying, "It's not worth the fight. Let her have this one. She'll calm down." But she didn't. One day, maybe 2 months before the wedding, we were going over the ceremony with the priest, who, by the way, was handpicked by her because he understands our roots, and La Dona casually mentioned that I would be expected to kneel before Luis and recite a vow of obedience. I thought I misunderstood. I laughed. She didn't. She explained, in front of the priest and Luis and his cousins, that in their family, the bride must kneel in front of the groom, place her hands in his, and say, "I will obey you, serve you, and honor you for the rest of my days. Your will is my will." I stared at her. The room was dead silent. I looked at Luis and said, "You don't expect me to say that, do you?" He looked uncomfortable. Didn't answer at first. Then said the words that flipped a switch in my head. "Just do it to keep the peace." After that day, things went downhill fast. She started sending me emails. Paragraphs long. Explaining why tradition was important. Saying things like, a woman's role is not equal, it is essential but different. She even linked articles from ultra-religious blogs to prove her point. She told Luis he needed to guide me. She said my refusal to kneel showed a lack of respect for their entire family lineage. When we didn't respond fast enough to her demands, she started contacting my mom, telling her that I was confused by American feminism. My mom told her to stay in her lane. That only made her worse. She flew to California to check on the final preparations. We already had everything planned. Dresses, vendors, vows. I was excited. Stressed, but excited. She came into our apartment uninvited while I was at work. Rearranged decorations. Took down the seating chart I had on the fridge and replaced it with her own. Tried to change the playlist on my phone. Told Luis he had to rehearse the obedience vow scene with me, like we were acting in a play. That night I told Luis I was done. I said, "You either back me up or I'm calling off the wedding." He said, "Just let her do what she needs. You're still getting what you want. We can have music, dancing, food. Just say the vow and we move on." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The church was packed. Over 170 people. All his extended family. Mine too. The mariachi band was warming up outside. The photographer was setting up drones for aerial shots. We had a huge projector screen behind the altar, which we planned to use later for wedding videos and a live feed from my grandma in the States. I was nervous, but calm, until we got to the vows. Luis said his part. Then the priest looked at me and nodded. Now the bride may kneel. I didn't move. La Dona, from the front pew, stood up so fast she knocked over a bouquet. She raised her voice, not yelling, but just loud enough for everyone to hear. "And no son of mine will marry a woman who won't obey our traditions." Gasps. Whispers. One guy coughed awkwardly. Luis looked at me and whispered again, "Just do it to keep the peace." I looked at him. I looked at the crowd. Then I reached into the folds of my dress and pulled out my phone. So yeah, there I was. Dressed in white, bouquet in one hand, phone in the other. A church full of stunned people staring at me. My husband looking like he wanted the floor to open up. The priest frozen like someone hit pause. And La Donna, standing in the front row, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line like she had just been personally insulted by the Virgin Mary. I held up my phone and said, "Actually, let's ask your grandmother." The room was quiet enough to hear my heartbeat. I tapped the screen. It started ringing. The church projector, which had been set up to show wedding photos later, now lit up with a FaceTime feed. And then, there she was. Great Abuela Maria. 93 years old, sitting in her recliner in San Diego, wrapped in a shawl, surrounded by her bingo friends. A total surprise guest. She squinted into the screen. "Mija? Is it time?" I smiled. "Yes, Abuela. I have a question for you." La Donna turned white. Her hands clenched the edge of the pew. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I asked loud and clear, "Did you or your daughters ever kneel at their weddings and promise to obey their husbands?" Abuela leaned forward. Her expression changed. "Obey? What are you talking about?" "I married my husband because I loved him, not because I wanted to be his maid." The whole church heard it. She went on, calm but direct. "That's not a family tradition. That's something Lilia made up. I never told her to do that. None of my daughters said those words. That's not our way." Now the whispers in the church turned into straight-up chatter. People were pulling out phones. Some were recording. A few of the older women looked visibly shocked. Luis turned to his mother and said, "Is that true?" She didn't answer. Just when I thought that was the worst of it, another voice came through the video call. A woman. Probably in her 50s. Turns out it was Luis's aunt, Donna Lilia's own sister, sitting next to Abuela Maria. She leaned into the camera and said, "Tell them the truth, Lilia. Tell them why you really made up the obedience vow." Now everyone was paying attention. Luis looked like someone punched him in the gut. The aunt didn't wait. She said those words at her wedding because her husband didn't want to marry her. She thought if she promised to obey him in front of the church, he wouldn't leave her. Abuela Maria nodded. It didn't work. Dead silence. You could have dropped a pin and heard it echo. La Donna looked like she was about to faint. The priest quietly stepped back. The altar boys avoided eye contact. My maid of honor whispered, "Should I sit down or are we fighting someone?" Luis was still staring at his mother. She turned slowly, like her neck was made of cement, and whispered something to him. He shook his head. Then he looked at me. And he didn't look angry. He looked like a man who had just realized his whole life was based on someone else's lies. The projector screen was still on. People kept watching. The bingo ladies were cheering in the background. Abuela Maria was waving. "Basta ya. Let the girl say her own vows. It's her wedding, not Lilia's drama show." La Donna sat down. She didn't speak. But her face tight, red, stiff, said enough. People around her started pulling their chairs back. A few cousins moved to different pews. Some guests were standing now. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. One of Luis's uncles, big guy, loud voice, known for being drunk at family events, stood up near the back and yelled out, "If the bride can disrespect tradition, why have a church wedding at all?" Now people were arguing. Like really arguing. Another cousin shouted back, "If your tradition is a lie, what are we even defending?" Luis's dad tried to calm them down, but then someone brought up another wedding from years ago where La Donna apparently forced a cousin's wife to wear her dress, and people were still mad about it. Now everything was unraveling. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about decades of silent resentment finally breaking open, and I had accidentally lit the match. The church was chaos now. People were arguing in hushed tones, standing up, whispering, sitting back down. Some older relatives looked confused. Others looked like they were finally getting answers they'd been waiting years for. The priest leaned toward Luis and whispered, "We can pause the ceremony if you want." Luis didn't respond. He looked stunned. La Donna stayed seated, but I could see her gripping the edge of the pew so hard her knuckles were white. Her eyes weren't on me. They were on the screen. On Abuela Maria. Just when I thought things might calm down, Abuela Maria leaned in closer to the screen and said something barely audible. "She never told you, did she?" I blinked. Told him what? Luis looked up. Told me what? Abuela looked serious now. Her voice was calm but heavy. "Your mother tried to stop your father from seeing me for over 10 years. Luis looked confused. "What do you mean?" Abuela sighed. "After your father and I had a falling out, he still called me sometimes. But your mother didn't like that. She told people I was mentally unwell. That I didn't support the family. She told people not to trust me. I wasn't even invited to your high school graduation." Luis whispered, "That was because you were sick." "No, Mijo. That's what she told you. I wasn't sick. I was cut out. Because I told her once, just once, that marriage should be equal. The church was dead quiet again. People were now facing La Dona. Luis turned to her, quietly, but with that sharp tone you only use when you're about to break something. You lied to me about my own grandmother? La Dona opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I did what I had to do. Before anyone could speak again, Luis's aunt, still on the video call, interrupted. Tell him all of it, Lilia. Or I will. La Dona stared at the screen, still said nothing. So the aunt said it herself. Luis, when you were in college, your mother intercepted a letter from your girlfriend at the time. It was from Isabella. She came to visit. She wanted to talk. Your mother sent her away before you ever saw her. She said you were busy with a better girl from the church. Luis froze. Isabella. I knew that name. She was the girl Luis dated in college before me. They'd lost touch, and he always said he didn't know why. She told me she got tired of waiting, he said slowly. She never stopped waiting, said the aunt. Your mother made sure she never got near you again. Gasps. Loud ones. Two of the bridesmaids covered their mouths. I've never seen a man look more broken than Luis did at that moment. He stepped away from the altar, put both hands on the pew in front of his mother. Why would you do that to me? La Dona didn't answer. He turned to the priest. Can we have a moment, please? The priest nodded and stepped aside. Luis took my hand and walked me down the aisle, past the whispers, past the people recording, past the cousins who were now glaring at his mother, and led me into a small hallway behind the altar. We stood in silence for a few seconds. Then he said, I didn't know about any of it. I nodded. I believe you. I thought I knew who she was. She raised me. I thought she was just dramatic. Controlling, yeah. But I thought she was trying to protect me. I didn't realize she'd lie, manipulate, destroy other people's relationships. He sat down on a bench against the wall. What do we do? I looked at him. That's up to you. Back in the chapel, things weren't quiet anymore. One of Luis's cousins stood up and loudly said, if she's lied about all this, how do we know anything she says is real? Another relative added, she told me my wife was a gold digger. That's why I didn't invite her to our anniversary dinner. Then an older woman near the back stood and spoke to the crowd. She tried to convince us all that Maria was crazy. But Maria was the only one who told me to leave my abusive husband. People were turning on La Dona. Not just disagreeing, calling her out. And she, for the first time in probably her entire life, had nothing to say. Her mouth stayed shut. Her eyes were on the ground. Let me just say, my family? Watching this unfold like they paid for front row seats. My mom was sitting in the second row with her arms crossed, nodding like, MMMHMM. Let it burn. My cousins? Filming. Not even trying to be discreet. One of them whispered to the other, this is better than any telenovela I've seen. As if things weren't wild enough, the back doors of the church opened, and in walked a woman I'd never seen before. She was in her 40s, wearing jeans and a blouse. She looked around, confused, then locked eyes with La Dona. La Dona's whole body stiffened. The woman walked straight up the aisle and said, Lilia, you remember me? Luis's cousin whispered, who is that? The woman looked around at everyone. I'm Luisa. I'm Lilia's half-sister. She's been pretending I don't exist since 1989. Now the entire room exploded into gasps. Someone actually dropped a drink on the floor. I swear the priest nearly sat down in shock. So now there was this woman, Luisa, standing in the aisle. Calm, steady. Holding her bag, hands clenched, like she had practiced what to say 100 times in front of a mirror. And La Dona? She looked like the walls were closing in. People were stunned. Someone whispered, is that her sister? Another person said, half-sister? Since when? Luisa kept going. She told everyone I ran away. That I left the family. That I was jealous of her. None of it's true. She told my father not to include me in his will. She erased me. She looked around the church. I found out about this wedding through Facebook. And something told me to come. Now I know why. Luis slowly stepped back into the room just in time to hear that last part. He looked at Luisa, then at his mother. Why would you do that? Why would you erase your own sister? La Dona finally spoke. Barely. She was a mistake. The room gasped. Audibly. It was like oxygen got sucked out. Luisa didn't even flinch. You were always good at that, Lilia. Controlling the story. Hiding what made you feel small. Then it happened. Luis raised his voice, not a shout, but loud enough that his voice shook. You lied to me my whole life. You lied about Abuela. You lied about Isabella. You lied about your own sister? What kind of person does that? La Dona stood slowly. Her voice came out icy. I did what I had to do. To protect this family. Luis shook his head. No. You protected your image. Not me. Not anyone else. The priest tried to step in. Maybe we can all take a moment, but it was too late. This had been building for decades. Luis turned to face the whole church. If anyone here has ever felt like my mother shut you out, silenced you, made you feel less, I want you to know, I'm sorry. I believed her lies. I let her make decisions for me. But not anymore. He turned back to me. I want to marry you. With your vows. Our way. But not with her standing here pretending to bless it. La Dona's voice cracked. You would choose her over your own blood? Luis didn't blink. Yes, 100 times. Because she doesn't lie to me. La Dona didn't cry. She didn't scream. But she stepped down the aisle, walked past the pews, and right out the door. Not a word. Not a glance back. She just left. And it was quiet. So quiet. I looked at Luis. He looked at me. And for the first time all day, he smiled. A real one. Like a weight had been lifted that he didn't even know he was carrying. The priest cleared his throat. Shall we continue? Luis turned to the guests. Only if you still want to stay. And somehow they did. Not everyone, but most of them. People sat down. The band got quiet. A few family members wiped tears. Some nodded at us like we had just done something sacred. My mom gave me a small, proud thumbs up. Classic. Luis took my hand again, and we walked back to the altar. This time, there were no obedience vows. No kneeling. Just honest words. Just us. Outside, as we greeted guests, people came up with stories. Cousins, uncles, old friends. One said, she told me never to date my wife. That she was beneath our family. Another whispered, your grandmother helped me leave my abusive husband. Lilia told me it was a sin. Even the priest pulled us aside and said, I've done weddings for 30 years. I've never seen anything like this. But it was the most honest ceremony I've ever witnessed. Later that night, in the hotel room, I found Luis sitting alone on the balcony. He had his suit jacket off, tie undone, staring at nothing. I asked him, are you okay? He didn't answer right away. I think I lost my mother today. I sat down beside him. Maybe, but maybe you just saw her for the first time. He nodded. Quiet. Then he said, I spent my life thinking her control was love. That everything she did was to protect me. And now I realize it was all fear. Her fear of losing control. Her fear of people finding out the truth. And she passed that fear on to me. It's been 10 months since the wedding. Luis hasn't spoken to his mother. She hasn't tried to reach out either. But he did reconnect with his aunt and his half-aunt Luisa. They talk every week now. Abuela Maria passed away a few months after the wedding. But not before she got to see the photos. The videos. The happiness in Luisa's eyes. She said she was proud of him. That he broke the chain. As for me, I married a man who had to unlearn everything his mother taught him about control and obedience. And he's doing it. Every day. We don't talk much about the wedding. But when we do, we don't talk about the dress, the food, the music. We talk about the truth. And how freeing it was to finally say it, even if it shattered everything else.